In our last tutorial, we took a look at basic HTML elements, and how to describe content on an HTML page using those elements. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about basic CSS selectors and how to use CSS to style your web pages. So to get started, you can see here I'm still working in my index.html file. I've changed it up a bit so we can talk a little bit more specifically about styling text first. So we have a little bit more text to work with on the screen. And to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a style element so we can have our CSS in the head of our HTML document here. That's one of 3 ways to incorporate CSS into your web page. You can have a separate CSS document, which is highly recommended, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it's easier to have everything on one page. So we're going to have or incorporate our CSS on the HTML page itself. The third way is to have inline CSS, where you're actually naming your styles with the elements on the page. And usually that's suboptimal, because what ends up happening is when you need to update a style, you have to sort through all of your code to find where you're naming your styles, and that defeats the purpose of style sheets, really, as far as maintenance goes, because when you have your styles named in an external document, or even in the head of your document, you only have to change those styles in one place, not on multiple pages of your website, hunting and pecking for each style that you've named. That would take a long time. Let's get started. Inside of the head of our HTML document, what we're going to do, let's do it after our title element. We're going to open up the style element, like so, and the style element has an attribute specifically for CSS. So we say that attribute is type equals, and if you notice the hinting here in Adobe Edge Code, it's already telling us text/CSS. That's all we need. And we don't need to do anything else except to close this opening tag. Edge Code is already closing that tag for us, and I'm going to make some space. Now what happens in between this open and close style tag is that we're going to name all of the CSS we want to describe the content, not to describe the content, but to style the content of the elements in the page below. The syntax of CSS is a little bit different, so let's get started first with changing a little bit in how our paragraphs look. So we can change elements, the style of elements directly with CSS, and we use selectors. And if we use, if our selector is the paragraph selector, what we're saying is for all paragraphs on the page, we want to apply this new style. And so the syntax for CSS is selector, and then curly braces, open and close. And I like to do mine on a separate line. And then what ends up being inside of your curly braces are properties and values for your new style. So with my paragraph text, let's say I want to change the size of my text. So I want to say font-size. That's one of the properties that I can use here, and there are a number of different units I can use. So let's just say we'll go with percentages right now, and we'll say font size for paragraphs equals 120%, like so. And you'll see, if you look in the preview on the right hand side, that our text is now bigger. And here we see the full syntax for CSS. We have our selector, which is in this case the paragraph element. So we're saying for all paragraph elements, we want to change the font size, colon, but to a value of 120%. And then all properties and values end with a semicolon. If we want to change any of the characteristics of our paragraph selector, can start a new line, and to do just that, we can change the color of our paragraph text. So we're going to use this color property, colon, and then we can either use a hexadecimal color, we can use a word name for color, or we can use an RGB value. So if we use a hexadecimal color, we could say it's a medium gray. So now our text technically is a medium gray. We could go a little bit lighter if we wanted to. There, that's very light. So we've changed the color and we've changed the font size. We can also change the distance between the lines of text with line dash height. So line height, we could say, is 140%. Oops. Like so. Oh, don't forget your semicolons at the end of the line. Save, so you can see we're opening up the text and making it a little bit more readable. I don't think that it's quite, the contrast isn't quite where I would like it to be. Technically, I want something that's a little bit higher contrast, so let's say, still working in between the open and close style tags. We're going to start a new selector. Let's change what the H1 looks like. So H1, that'll be our selector. We're going to open and close some curly braces. And then the property we'll use here is font family. Notice the hinting is already showing us some of the properties that we can change. So if you just want to explore, start typing. So font family, colon, and then our options here, these are some popular options. There you can scroll through and see what's available. Let's just go with Trebuchet for now, and we'll use sans serif as a fallback. If the machine that you're working on doesn't have Trebuchet, you can always use sans serif. I'm going to end that property or that value with a colon, semicolon, like so. And now you can see my headline has changed. We can do the same thing for our header level 2, H2, like so. And let's say font family Trebuchet sans serif, and with a semicolon. So hopefully you're getting the hang of what's going on here. We can also change the style of our anchors. Anchors are a special case with CSS because they are pseudo classes. So if you think about a web link, there are 4 different states. There's a link state, an active state, a hover state, and a visited state. And we can apply styles to all 4 of those states. So we could have an anchor selector like so. And if we use an anchor selector, what we're saying is that for all states of the anchor, we're going to have the same style, which is great, but it's hard to indicate interactivity. So if you think about a link on the web, you might notice that when you roll over some web links, they change color. That's the hover state. So we want to have control over those things too. To affect these different states, we can use the pseudo classes link, like so. We also have hover. Oops. We have active. And we have visited. Like so, and we can change colors accordingly. If we want to change the color, I just use the color property. So we can say that we want all of the colors, let's use word names for these, all of the colors for our links can be orange. Interesting. So if you take a look to the right, our colors are now orange. Hover state, we can change so that the hover state is red. Color, red. Active can be the same, that's up to you. That's the color that when the link is clicked on, changes to. So technically we don't need to change that, but And then visited, that's handy if you have lots of links on your page to indicate to people which links they've already been to. Color. Let's say our visited links are green for contrast in this case. So now you can see if we hover over our links, it's now red. If we were to visit this link and come back, let's go back. Need to refresh. Our link is green. So this is just a brief introduction to CSS and the syntax. And if you take a look, we have used the paragraph selector, the anchor pseudo class selectors, link, hover, active, and visited. And then we've also used the header selectors to change the style of the text on our page. I encourage you to experiment with these styles and other selectors as you're working on your own. What I'm going to do for the next tutorial is talk specifically about the box model. So we'll talk about borders, padding, and margin, and how you can influence box level elements.